Welcome. So in the last session, we spoke about public policy, and we spoke about the dimensions of policy, and you've all been thinking about the policy interventions that you are working on in your countries that you're concerned about. Now, we spend a lot of time looking at policies that work and policies that don't. And there are literatures that examine the reasons for failure and success. One of the literatures is actually called the failure factor literatures, which identifies the factors. And you'll see in that literature, people will say things like, there was low political will, there was low capacity, there was a lot of complexity, there were surprises. And we kind of say, well, it's really, really hard to work with a list of 30, 40 different things that are very context specific. So we've been working on trying to make sense of all of these factors in a model that is simple enough to work with, but that is also powerful enough, that tells us what do you need to be successful in public policy implementation. And we come down with the idea that you need capabilities. Now, what are capabilities? Capabilities are like a holistic set of many different things that are required to solve the problems that we're dealing with. We think that there are 4 key dimensions of capabilities. The first one is just the abilities that we have. The abilities that we have would be the resources, the mental capacities, the physical capacities, the things that we train and the things that we buy into systems. These are going to reside mostly in people, but they're also going to reside in the organization, determining things like how much information do you have, how many computers do you have, how many cars do you have. Those are abilities, right? The second is authority or power, which is something that's important because it determines how well you use the abilities. See, you can have information in a system, but if you don't have the authorization to use that information in your system, then that information doesn't work. So the first one is abilities, and the second one is the authority or the power to use the abilities. The third one is acceptance, which is, do we accept that we need to use the authority we have, use the abilities we have in certain ways, or do we not? This has got something to do with motivation, it's got something to do with incentive, it's got something to do with drive. And these are really 3 important things that determine what we can do. The fourth one is the mobilizing processes that put them together. Because you could have acceptance in a system where people say, we really want to solve the problem. You could have ability to do it. You could even have authority to do it, but those things could be in different parts of your system. So we therefore need a process that brings them together at the right time, in the right place, with the right amount of energy and structure. Now, the capabilities are always going to be centered on solving problems. It's a very interesting thing. There's a literature on capabilities that essentially says we don't always know how to measure these things, but we can measure the capability of the system by the number of problems that the system manages to solve. So if you're in a government where you have a lot of successful policies, what it says is that you have a lot of capabilities. If you have only a few policies and many, many policies that are not solving social problems, it means that you have fewer capabilities. Now, what we want you to do this week is to think a little bit about the problem that you're trying to solve in the policy. Remember, you worked on that last time. And the capabilities that are going to be needed. What kinds of abilities, what kinds of resources, what kinds of skill sets are going to be needed? What kinds of information? The authority. What kinds of authorization are required, and for whom? And where does it need to come from? Is your policy a very high-profile policy that requires authority from the head of state? Or are you looking at something that is much more within the machinery of government, where maybe you need to have the authorization only of someone at a directorial level or something like that? Whose acceptance do you need? Whose motivation do you need? Who needs to be inspired to do this? And what kind of processes do you think can mobilize them? Now, we're going to ask you questions around these issues, and we'll see where we come to. And then we're going to look at your homework. And when you come to Harvard next week and the next few weeks, we're going to be exploring your answers. And we're going to be building up an understanding of the different kinds of mobilizing processes you have and the different kinds of capabilities that maybe you can develop to solve the problems in your systems. Thank you.